I'm going to talk us through the perfect sleep cycle. I've just been doing some study, watching some videos with Dr. Gina Poe and reading some of her papers. And so I thought I'd bring you this week's learning and put it into an electronic form for you this week because it's current. It doesn't get fresher than this. So we have some perceptions about sleep that I think it would be really good of us to know more about. And I've got it written up on the board, and the main thing I want to talk us through is the phases of sleep. And I want us to understand that I don't care what anyone says to you, the data is really clear. We need 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep, not time in bed. Time in bed might be 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep, but we need 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep. I got those data wrong, but it's close enough, of sleep. And we need that to become really, really fresh in the morning and make sure the brain has the time to do what it needs to do. But we also need to make sure that sleep's at the right time. So our circadian rhythm is really embedded in the human brain. It's a primal brain. And the belief is, the hypothesis is that the primal man would go into the cave about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If they'd had a successful hunt, they would have had a large meal, and it would take 3 to 4 hours for that very natural feast to digest, at which stage their body temperature would have dropped, and we're going to talk about this in biohacks, and it would have allowed them to go into the deep sleep cycle. And then they would have woken up about 3 or 4 in the morning, ready to go out for pre-dawn hunting. So they would have been asleep by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and they would have been waking up at 3 or 4. Now we've slid that slightly. Generally, a great night's sleep starts at about 10 p.m. for us, and many of you were sitting there going, I don't get to bed before midnight. We're going to talk about the detriment of that. But if we look at the board, there's actually 4 stages of sleep. There's more, but let's just keep it really shallow, like a puddle. So the first phase is when we just go to bed, which is non-REM sleep, and it's dozing. It's just that first 10 to 15 minutes, and we should be falling asleep. It's called latency, sleep latency. If you fall asleep within 2 to 5 minutes, you are overtired. So latency, falling asleep, should be sort of 11 to 15 minutes, and we should fall asleep. And then that first phase could be 10, 15 minutes, and that's just a dozing stage. We're just relaxing, we're getting snuggly and warm in our comfortable bed. And then we're going into phase 2 of non-REM sleep. And this is a really interesting stage. This is where there's things called sleep spindles. Now sleep spindles, I can't give you all the technical data, but listen to Gina Poe, she's fantastic. But a sleep spindle, and this will make sense to you, is where we end up doing those little jerks awake. You know, you're laying there in bed and you're like, oh my gosh. And I haven't bitten my tongue, or your partner jumps and makes you go like that. That's when the sleep spindles are communicating from the brain to the muscles and saying we're getting ready for sleep. We're just relax. And as that little message goes out, that little electronic message, the muscles can feel, or the brain can feel as though it's falling. And so it tenses the muscles and you get that jerk response. So it's sleep spindles in phase 2 of non-REM sleep, where we'll get that jerk reaction. There's also hallucination at this state. So a lot of hallucination where we actually think we're still awake, but we're actually in a sleep stage. And so it's a really interesting, unique phase of sleeping, and it's just before the brain's really starting to encode and do some work around memory. The next phase is our deep wave sleep. So it's our big, slow wave sleep. And the belief is that this is the deepest deep sleep, and it's so wrongly named because REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, is actually a deeper sleep than deep sleep. But we won't give the neuroscientists a hard time about that. But deep sleep is this fascinating phase where the brain is actually physically washing itself, and by that it produces fluid. And I spoke earlier in one of the earlier chunks about the brain actually getting into synchrony and bilge pumping, and it's cleaning toxins. That happens in this deep, slow wave phase. The slow waves drive through the brain and help that cleaning process. Really important. And then our REM sleep is our rapid eye movement, and this is our coding or encoding stage. This is where the brain is making sense of things. This is where you have these vivid dreams. And luckily, you are actually in a state of paralysis in this stage. The body actually paralyzes you. I mean, it's really weird, right? So it's actually stopping you from movement. And so if you see your partner or yourself, or feel yourself, or see a child and they're very rigid, they're actually not in deep sleep, they're in REM sleep, and the body's paralyzed them so they can't act out on their dreams, because we don't want you riding your unicorn naked on the beach in a dream, right? We don't want you getting up looking for a unicorn. So what's happening to the brain, it's opening drawers and it's trying to find out where it's finding things. So basically the brain moves something from, to give it a light metaphor, the information we learn in our experiences are on our USB. During this phase of sleep, it's trying to move the learning and find logic in it and put it onto the hard drive. PTSD and anxiety and trauma often don't get loaded because when they're going through the process, the brain doesn't have any logic for it. It doesn't know where to put it, and so it will keep the trauma on the USB. The other thing that we're seeing an increase in trauma in people, not so much because of the increase in trauma in our world, but because our brains are so overwhelmed that we're actually not going through our complete 90-minute sleep cycles, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the brain's actually not getting time over the sleep period because sleep's so shortened and it's so interrupted that the USB information isn't getting processed and loaded onto the hard drive. So if we look at the board, what I've got here is generally the brain works in 90-minute sleep cycles. They start off actually longer than that. They start off between 95 minutes and 105 minutes as the first sleep cycle. Within about 20 minutes of falling asleep, you will be entering into deep wave sleep. So that's that first cleaning. So the first phase of sleep is between 95 and 105 minutes. It gets shorter and shorter over the course of the evening. But if you work on an average of 90 minutes, that's great. So what that means is during that 90 minutes, you'll have some light sleep, some non-REM sleep, you'll have some deep sleep, and then you'll have some REM sleep in there as well. So those three phases, and it goes through these 90-minute cycles. The 90-minute cycles this side of midnight, so 10 p.m. to 12 a.m., 9 p.m. to 12 a.m., are the cycles where there's deep cleansing of the brain and all of that encoding and the memory work's happening. So I've got it highlighted up here. 0 to 4 hours is where the brain washes itself, the memory processing occurs, the movement from the hippocampus to the cortex, so the USB to the hard drive happens, and we've also got a massive bolus of hormone, a massive release of growth hormone, which is really important to the body. That happens in the first 0 to 4 hours. If we miss, but remember that window needs to occur with a bias to pre-midnight. If we miss it, then this phase is missed. The body doesn't do it when we go to bed at 12 a.m. The body only does this, the brain only does this from sort of that 9, 10 o'clock being a great figure for us to go to bed, and then for the first 2 to 3 hours. And then post-midnight, it's starting to go into our second phase of sleep, which has much less deep sleep and a lot more of our brain creativity, and our ideas start forming threads, and we start seeing collaboration, and we start seeing synergies between things, and that happens in the later stages. So from sort of 1:30, 2 a.m. through to 4, 5, 6 a.m. in the morning. Occasionally you'll get another window of deep sleep around that 5, 6 a.m. in the morning where the brain's done all its processing, and it will allow you to go back into another slow wave sleep. But generally, if you've got you're reporting sleep data on either a Fitbit or an Oura Ring, you'll find there's a heavy bias for midnight, pre-midnight for deep sleep, and then a great bias for your REM sleep on the other side of midnight. So what this is saying to us is that we need to be really aware of a couple of things. One is, from the time we generally go to bed, we should be thinking about our waking up time as at the end of a 90-minute cycle. What we don't want to be doing is setting as our alarm up so it's waking us in the middle of REM sleep or in the middle of a 90-minute phase. So you're better to get up at 6 a.m. versus wake up in the middle of a 90-minute phase at 6:30 or 6:45, or better to stay in bed till 7:30 and allow that 90-minute to have completed. So your homework really is to go and think about when you go to bed and try and figure out a 90-minute chunks as to when's the best time to set that alarm. Go either side of the 90, but not in the middle. It's really, really disruptive to the brain. If you wake up in a deep cycle sleep, and that deep wave sleep, you'll feel very lethargic and very tired. If you wake up in the middle of REM sleeping, and our rapid eye movement and our dreaming, you can actually be in a very agitated state because the brain could be in the middle of encoding. So really, really important there to look at those phases and make sure that our wake up in the morning is in line with our 90-minute phases. So we're going to talk more about in the biohack section, but really that's what a perfect night's sleep looks like. You can tell me all that you want that you never get to bed before midnight, and my challenge to you is you can't afford not to. So you're much better to get up at 4:30 a.m. in the morning and work till 6:30 a.m. than you are to work from 10 p.m. till 12 a.m. Because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the reptilian brain, the human, has the circadian rhythm and it doesn't move. It's very, very, you can tell me that you're a night person and that you're night neural and that's your thing, or you have an AM bias or a PM bias. That's nice. It's like Mrs. Brown says, that's nice. However, the data is really clear. The data is really clear. The brain only does this work pre-midnight. If you miss it, you're slightly fucked. So we need to be getting our children into bed, we need to be getting ourselves into bed, but we need to know the biohacks of how to get there, and that's what we're going to talk about next. As you embark on this fascinating journey into the world of neuroscience and cutting-edge research, I want to ensure that we're on the same page, legally speaking. Firstly, it's essential to clarify that I'm not a qualified neuroscientist, licensed therapist or counsellor. My role is to present you with meticulously sourced information from neuroscientists from around the world, drawing down from their doctorate papers and university research. I've taken the liberty of translating the scientific knowledge into layman's terms and spiced it up with my own unique interpretive dance, because learning should be both fun and actionable. However, please bear in mind that the information and courses provided here are intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes. They are not a substitute for professional medical advice, and I strongly advise consulting qualified health professionals such as physicians, coaches, therapists, psychologists for your personalised guidance. Your well-being is of the utmost importance to me. Therefore, while I strive to deliver intriguing insights, remember that making significant life changes require thoughtful consideration and appropriate guidance. You're invited to venture forth with me on this journey of discovery and growth, armed with knowledge and understanding to enrich our lives in meaningful ways.